Sparkly salutations! This video is going to be pretty different because instead of the normal makeup content, I'm going to be talking about endometriosis. March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, and I thought I would use my very tiny platform to participate in that. Since yellow is the color for this cause, I'm wearing one of the few pieces of yellow clothing that I own, which happens to be a Pikachu jacket, so there's ears on it, and I've done a yellow makeup look, which is unusual for me. Disclaimers: the only medical training I have is a CPR certification from about 2009, but I've done my best to use reputable sources for my research. Also, I will be talking about periods and uteruses and other things that society thinks are uncomfortable to hear about, so you've been warned. If you haven't heard of endometriosis, it's a gynecological disorder in which there's tissue growing where it shouldn't be, usually in your pelvis, but it also just goes wherever it wants to. The tissue is similar to the stuff that lines the uterus, which is where the name comes from. Endo has all sorts of evil side effects, and the only way to definitively diagnose it is through surgery. It generally takes quite a long time to get an official diagnosis, even if you found a doctor who takes you seriously, which good luck with that. It's hard to be certain about the statistics with endo because of how hard it is to diagnose. Some people who have it don't notice any symptoms. Others definitely notice the symptoms, but they get told that it's probably something else. Sometimes, if their doctor is especially incompetent, the patient is told that the symptoms can't be that bad, or they're just a normal part of having a uterus. The general estimate is that between 2 and 10% of female bodies of reproductive age are affected by it. It does also occur in male bodies, but that is quite rare. So, if you have endometriosis, what kinds of symptoms might you experience? Well, the most iconic one is horrendous periods. Severe cramps, pain, heavy bleeding, nausea, migraines, and irregular cycles. Periods are never pleasant, but if your cycle is wonky or it seriously disrupts your life, then endometriosis might be the reason why. Other possible symptoms are chronic fatigue, pain during sex, pain when using the bathroom, gastrointestinal issues, infertility, and abdominal bloating. Symptoms of endo might be correlated to your menstrual cycle or happen whatever they darn well please. Once you realize this is a thing you're experiencing, there aren't a whole lot of options for treating it, and there isn't a cure. You can take pain medication when you're hurting, and hormones like birth control can help make the symptoms less awful. You can have the growth surgically removed, but even then, the pain may not completely go away, and even if it does, it could come back. Even going to the extreme of taking out your entire uterus and your ovaries isn't guaranteed to make your symptoms stop, although that would at least get rid of your periods. The information available on various medical websites is good and important, but I think it's also helpful to hear about individual experiences, so here we go! When I was a teenager, my periods were bad. I never had cramping pains back then, which was fortunate, but I had very heavy bleeding to the point that I had iron deficiency anemia because of it. The first day or two was always the worst because I was really weak and had trouble standing up for more than a couple minutes at a time. It got better by day 3, but I still felt really gross and uncomfortable. I would wear more than one pad at a time so I wouldn't bleed onto my clothes, and that usually worked. At one point during a checkup, I told my doctor about how much I was bleeding and how awful my periods made me feel. She made a noise like, and changed the subject, so I assumed that meant that it was normal and that everybody suffered during their periods, and I just handled it worse than most people for whatever reason. Another issue I experienced was never knowing when my period would happen. It's common for it to take a year or two for your cycle to normalize, but even when I was 19 and using a tracking app, I just had no idea what to expect. Some months I would have 2 periods, and then other times I'd go more than a month without one, and my tracking app just had no idea what to do with me. I started taking birth control when I was 20, and that helped a lot. For the first time ever, I knew exactly when I would be feeling gross. The pill also made me bleed a lot less. This was around the time that I first started having cramping feelings, but they weren't too bad, and they were a lot less of a pain. Well, okay, no, they were more of a pain, but, they were less of a struggle than the very heavy bleeding was. I eventually learned that it's possible to just skip over the week of placebo pills and start a new pack right away, so I don't even have to deal with artificial periods anymore. I do want to clarify that before I started skipping placebo pills, I talked to my doctor about it and made sure that she was okay with it, because you really shouldn't start changing your medication routines without confirming with the doctor first. Here's a brief intermission for some fun facts about birth control. The entire reason why birth control packs have placebo pills is because the men who developed the pill in the 50s thought that a week of uncomfortable bleeding would reassure the women taking it that the pill was working and they were not pregnant. I highly doubt that any women were consulted in this decision. One of the men also tried to use the pseudo-period as a way to convince the Catholic Church that birth control should be allowed because the pill was simply mimicking nature or something. That didn't work, by the way. In 1968, the Pope still said that contraceptives are intrinsically wrong. One of the guys who developed the pill was worried that his wife wasn't following the pill's instructions properly, because, take one pill from this jar every day for 20 days and then stop for 5 days is apparently very complicated and was just too much for her to handle. He came up with the spinning circle design of a pill pack, which started out as having 5 empty spots, but eventually had fake pills added in to make it even less confusing for those poor, weak-minded women. By the late 60s, pills were coming in packs of 28 instead of 25, but still had placebos even though there's no medical reason for them to be there. Yay. Anyway, once I was on the pill, everything seemed fine and dandy until late 2019. I noticed some random cramp-like pain one night, and I thought it was probably just my intestines being angry or something, and the pain wasn't too bad, so I just tried to ignore it, and it went away before too long. A few days later, I was on a plane, because that was a thing we could do in 2019, and I had some sudden, really intense cramp-like pain, and I thought, oh no, am I suddenly having a period? Because I've been really diligent about my pills, so I don't know why this would be happening, but this has gotta be a period, right? Because that's what it feels like. So once the plane landed, I confirmed that there was no bleeding, not even a tiny bit. Nothing was visually wrong, so I was like, okay, I'm just hurting. That's cool. Since those random pains first showed up in 2019, it's gotten to the point where I now have some kind of pelvic pain basically every day. It's usually pretty quick, but on the bad days, I'm in pain on and off for hours. For whatever reason, ibuprofen doesn't seem to do anything to make it stop. A few weeks after the pains began, I tried taking my placebo pills to see if that would somehow change anything or help, and it didn't. The usual solution when I start hurting is to just sort of rub whatever area is in pain and hope that it stops. After several weeks of sporadic pelvic pains and no sign of it going away anytime soon, I made an appointment with my gynecologist to see if she could help me figure out what was wrong. From my own research and talking with some medically trained people that I know, I had a hunch it was probably endometriosis. I learned enough about it by that point to know that it can show up in ultrasounds, but that isn't a really good way of diagnosing it. My gynecologist asked me to go get an ultrasound done to see if anything was visibly wrong, and there was some kind of miscommunication, and they ended up doing the usual kind of ultrasound, like for pregnant people, instead of the kind where they put the transducer inside to check things out, so I got to go back again later for a second, even less comfortable ultrasound. That was fun. Not surprisingly, the ultrasounds didn't show anything strange. My doctor also felt around and didn't find anything with her poking, so she said that I should go see a gastroenterologist. I'm pretty sure she was just trying to get rid of me and pass me off to a different doctor. There is some overlap between possible endo symptoms and IBS, and some people do have both endo and IBS, but I'm fairly certain that IBS is not the issue here. There aren't a whole lot of medical options in my immediate area, and with the pandemic going on, I didn't really feel like continuing to make appointments and try new doctors to try to get diagnosed when an official diagnosis won't really change anything. I did recently have an appointment with a gynecologist out of town who took me more seriously, and she'll be doing surgery on me pretty soon. It'll be a laparoscopic procedure, and she'll be looking for endometriosis growths. If she finds any, she'll cut them out and look at them under a microscope, and we'll finally know for sure if that's what's been causing my pain and made my periods the way that they were back when I had them. If all goes well, I'll beat the average time it takes to get endo-diagnosed, which is somewhere between 7 to 10 years. I'm not kidding, that's how long it actually takes people to get endo-diagnosed. It's ridiculous. If it turns out to not be endo, then I have no idea what's wrong with me, and that's really frightening to think about. So let's just hope that she finds rogue tissue and it does turn out to be endo. I know this video won't be seen by very many people, but if I can help even one person learn something new about endometriosis, then this was worth it. Hopefully society gets over its whole "periods are shameful and must be kept secret" thing, so that teenagers will have an easier time being informed about their own bodies, people will realize when their periods are abnormal, and doctors will take us seriously and listen when we tell them that our periods are abnormal. I'm normally of the opinion that you should worry about what your own uterus is up to, and I'll worry about mine. Given the current circumstances, I'm inviting you to join me in worrying about my uterus for the next couple of weeks. The surgery shouldn't be a big deal and everything is probably going to be fine, but if you feel like saying a prayer for my surgeon and or my pelvis, I would appreciate it. Stay safe and listen to your body.